The attack came without warning, a blistering strike from the depths of space. The Gyark, an alien empire that had enslaved countless worlds, had underestimated humanity's resolve. Earth's capital, a gleaming city once filled with hope and peace, became nothing more than ash and rubble in the blink of an eye. The alien ships hovered in the sky, their sleek forms casting monstrous shadows over the terrified masses below. Within moments, the city was consumed by the overwhelming power of their weapons, lasers that could turn steel to vapor, missiles that shattered entire buildings, and bombs that erased history itself. Leah Cross watched it all from the command center, her heart frozen in fury. As the head of Earth's defense forces, she had seen her fair share of conflict, but nothing could have prepared her for the devastation that now unfolded. She had lost colleagues, friends, and even family to the cold hands of the Gyark. But this was beyond anything she had imagined. The screams of civilians filled the airwaves, desperate calls for help from every corner of the city. Then the silence came. The Gyark fleet withdrew, leaving behind a desolate world broken both in body and spirit. But humanity's heart had been ignited. General Cross knew the truth now. The time for diplomacy was over. They had made their mistake. The Gyark had unleashed the full fury of humanity, a wrath that would consume everything in its path. In the wake of the attack, Earth's leaders gathered in hastily convened war councils. Panic was rampant. The military was fractured, divided by regional loyalties and a sense of helplessness. There had been no war, no preparation for the scale of this invasion. But Leah Cross wasn't concerned with what wasn't ready. She was concerned with what was humanity's spirit. They had been wronged, and they would make the Gyark pay. You can't fight an empire this powerful with fractured forces, her second-in-command, Colonel Marcus Hale, said quietly as they surveyed the damage from the war room's windows. He was a seasoned soldier, his face etched with the weariness of countless battles. "We're outgunned, outnumbered." Cross turned to him, her eyes sharp as ice. "Then we do what they didn't expect. We unite them." She moved swiftly, contacting military leaders from across the globe, bypassing the slow bureaucracy of government. In just hours, forces began to assemble. Earth's greatest minds and engineers, previously focused on colonization and defense against minor threats, shifted focus to a singular purpose, turning humanity's anger into a weapon of unimaginable power. It wasn't just about retaliation. It was about something far deeper. This was the moment humanity had been waiting for, a moment of reckoning. They had always been portrayed as weak by their alien oppressors. But the Gyark had underestimated the raw power of human emotion, the unstoppable force of anger, love, and loyalty that burned within them. Leah Cross was no longer just a general. She was a symbol of the fire that had been kindled on Earth. The Crimson Vanguard was born that day, an elite task force formed from the best soldiers, engineers, and strategists the planet had to offer. Their mission: to bring the full weight of humanity's wrath upon the Gyark and every other species that had ever thought to oppress them. The message spread across the galaxy in moments. Humanity was no longer a victim. They would fight. They would burn their wrath across the stars. As Cross looked at the newly formed Vanguard, readying themselves for the war that would define their future, she knew one thing. The Gyark had awakened something within them, something far more dangerous than they could ever understand. It was the fire of rebellion, and it would not be extinguished. The first strike came fast, hitting the Gyark where they least expected it, their outermost colonies, the very territories they had taken for granted. Leah Cross had not waited for reinforcements or a formal declaration of war. The time for politeness was over. The Gyark had shown no mercy to humanity, and now they would learn that Earth's wrath would not be easily tamed. The Crimson Vanguard descended upon the first target, a Gyark mining colony on a barren moon in the Pithler system. The planet was critical to the Empire's production of rare minerals used for their weapons. Cross had identified this location as the perfect opportunity to send a message, not only to the Gyark, but to every empire that dared threaten humanity. Earth would not be a footnote in galactic history. They would stand as a force, fierce and relentless. Cross's ship, the Crimson Fury, led the assault, its sleek hull cutting through the void like a comet of vengeance. As they approached the mining colony, the Vanguard's fleet of warships, human-made, but with alien tech incorporated, engaged the Zhurk's defensive perimeter. What they didn't expect was the overwhelming swiftness and precision with which humanity's forces struck. Cross had spent countless hours perfecting tactics that would make their forces appear as ghosts on the battlefield, swift, silent, and unyielding. The Zhurk defense systems were formidable, but they were not prepared for humanity's speed or their brutal efficiency. The Vanguard's fighters, small and nimble, swooped down upon the colony's orbital defenses, disabling them in rapid succession with pinpoint strikes. The Zhurk ships, though large and heavily armored, were no match for the mobility and precision of the Crimson Vanguard's fighters. In just minutes, the outer defense grid was neutralized. On the ground, the Vanguard's infantry descended into the mining colony, fast roping from dropships and launching their attack. These soldiers, forged in the fires of Earth's desperate unity, were a new breed of warrior, fighting not just for survival, but for the sheer joy of retaliation. With each step, they tore through Zhurk barricades, pushing forward with the unstoppable force of an avalanche. The enemy was caught off guard, unable to match the fury of humanity's soldiers who had been fighting for this very moment their entire lives. General Cross led the charge, her face a mask of cold fury. She was everywhere, on the battlefield, giving orders, coordinating tactics, and inspiring her troops with every word and action. As the Vanguard breached the central command center of the colony, the Zhurk military leaders inside tried to mount a counteroffensive. But it was too late. The soldiers were overwhelmed, and the Zhurk commanders were taken prisoner. As Cross stood over the fallen leaders, her eyes burned with a searing hatred. The Zhurk had thought they could simply crush humanity with no consequence. Now they would feel the weight of that mistake. But the victory was not just military, it was psychological. The Zhurk had thought of Earth as weak, a primitive species ripe for exploitation. Now they had seen humanity's true power, a collective fury that could not be reasoned with, only feared. News of the Vanguard's success spread quickly across the galaxy, like a wildfire. Humanity's first victory had been nothing short of decisive. For the first time, the galaxy had seen that the Zhurk were not invincible. The Crimson Vanguard was unstoppable, and humanity's thirst for vengeance had only just begun. But it wasn't just about revenge anymore. With each strike, each victory, humanity gained something more valuable than any weapon. Allies. The oppressed species that had once cowered under the Zhurk's heel saw in Earth's rise a symbol of hope. Small resistance groups began to reach out, eager to unite with the Vanguard and strike back at their tormentors. From a handful of humans and a few scattered ships, a coalition began to form, bound together by a common enemy and a burning desire for freedom. The war for the galaxy had just begun, and humanity was not going to stop until the stars themselves trembled at their wrath. The victories were mounting, one after another. The Zhurk were reeling, their once imposing grip on the galaxy slipping with every strike of humanity's wrath. But even in the face of overwhelming success, General Leah Cross knew that this was not the time to grow complacent. They had ignited a fire, and fire was unpredictable. It could burn too hot, too fast, leaving nothing but ashes in its wake. The Vanguard's next target was the Zhurk homeworld, a sprawling metropolis encased in a ring of defense stations. Cross knew it would be the most challenging battle yet. To strike at the heart of their empire was to risk everything. But she also knew this was the only way to break the Zhurk spirit. The problem, however, was the cost. Every successful raid, every victory had drained the resources of Earth's forces. The warships, although powerful, were not indestructible. The fighters, although deadly, were not limitless. As the vanguard gathered in the depths of space, preparing for the assault, Cross found herself standing before the War Council, the weight of her decisions pressing down on her shoulders. The war was no longer just about revenge. It was about survival. They had to end it before the resources of Earth and its allies ran dry. "We don't have enough ships," Colonel Hale said, his voice laced with concern. "We've stretched ourselves too thin. We'll never make it to the Gyric homeworld with what we have." Cross gripped the table, her knuckles white. She had known this moment would come. There had been no way to predict how long Earth's forces could sustain the momentum of their strikes. And now, they were facing an enemy who was just as willing to sacrifice as they were. The Gyric were not just warriors. They were survivors. Every time they lost, they adapted, learned, and retaliated. "I know," Cross said, her voice unwavering. "But we can't turn back now. If we don't take the fight to their doorstep, they'll rebuild faster than we can destroy them. And every moment we hesitate, more lives are lost." She was right. The cost of war had already been paid in blood, both on Earth and in the colonies they had liberated. Soldiers, civilians, families, none were exempt. But the Gyric had shown no mercy, and humanity would not be the ones to blink first. The sacrifice would be high, but it would be worth it. They would push forward, no matter the cost. The next few days were a blur of preparation. The fleet was patched together, some ships barely holding together from previous battles, others in dire need of fuel and ammunition. Engineers worked around the clock to ensure that the forces would be as ready as possible. The vanguard soldiers, though weary, stood resolute, ready for the final push. The assault on the Gyric homeworld began at dawn, the stars alight with flashes of energy as the vanguard's fleet collided with the enemy's defenses. The first wave of fighters launched, a swarm of human-made craft diving into the heart of the Gyric fleet, cutting through the opposition with brutal efficiency. But the Gyric were waiting for them. Hidden behind decoy stations and cloaked ships, their forces emerged in full force, overwhelming the vanguard's front line with sheer numbers. The battle raged on for hours, the forces of humanity pushing forward even as their ships were torn apart. Cross watched as the Crimson Fury took damage, its hull rattling from the explosions all around. But they kept moving, cutting through the Gyric defenses, inching closer to the heart of the enemy's power. Then, as they reached the outer ring of the Gyric capital, disaster struck. A massive counteroffensive, more coordinated than anything they had faced before, ripped through their forces. The vanguard's second wave was nearly annihilated before they could even deploy, forcing Cross to make a brutal decision. The strike on the homeworld would need to be delayed. "We can't hold them back any longer, General," Hale said urgently over the comms. "If we don't retreat now, we risk losing the entire fleet." For a moment, Cross stood silent, her mind racing. The war had come to a crossroads. Victory was within their grasp, but at a cost they could no longer ignore. There were no easy decisions left. "We fall back," she ordered finally, her voice calm despite the storm swirling around them. "We'll regroup, and when the time comes, we'll strike harder." It was not the victory they had hoped for, but it was far from a defeat. They had learned something invaluable. The Gyric were not invincible. And as long as the Crimson Vanguard still fought, Earth's wrath would burn brighter than any enemy could withstand. The retreat was not a decision Leah Cross made lightly. It was a bitter pill to swallow after the fierce determination of the Vanguard had pushed them so far. But in the heat of the battle, with the Gyric capital just within reach, Cross knew the risk of losing everything outweighed the potential reward of a premature victory. Earth's forces were strained, and their ships, although remarkable in their design, had sustained severe damage. For the first time since the war began, Cross had to admit that they were on the verge of overextending themselves. The fleet limped back to their base of operations, a fortified station in the outer reaches of the system, built for emergencies like this one. The loss was not just in material. Many soldiers, engineers, and civilians had given their lives to the cause. The vanguard's ranks were thinner now, their spirits shaken by the cost of such a drawn-out battle. They had given everything they had, only to be forced to pull back. Cross stood in the command room of the station, her eyes scanning the situation reports, her mind still reeling from the failed assault. The defeat had left a bitter taste in her mouth, and the guilt was like a heavy weight pressing down on her chest. How many more would have to die for this war to end? "We've lost contact with several of our outposts in the sector," Colonel Hale said, his voice grim. "It's possible the Gyark have started their retaliation. We need to fortify our position, or we risk losing everything." Cross nodded silently. The war had reached a tipping point, but what Hale said next caught her off guard. "We've received messages from some of the colonies," he continued, his gaze hesitant. "There are rumors of a new alliance forming." "An alliance," Cross repeated, her brow furrowed. "With whom?" "Various resistance groups from the worlds we've liberated. Some of them want to join us in the fight. But others, they're reaching out to the Gyark, seeking an agreement, a truce, or something even worse. They see us as a threat now." The news hit like a physical blow. The very people they had fought to protect, the ones who had once rallied to humanity's banner, were now questioning the Vanguard's methods. There was a fracture in the coalition, and it threatened to split the fragile alliance that had been forged through bloodshed. "They think we're too aggressive," Hale added, his voice tinged with frustration. "That we're going too far, pushing too hard. Some believe we've become just as ruthless as the Gyark." Cross clenched her fists, the anger rising in her chest. She had sacrificed so much, and now there were those among their ranks who were questioning their path. They had been attacked first, slaughtered without mercy, and yet now humanity's desire for retribution was being seen as the greater evil. It was maddening. "I won't let this break us," Cross said, her voice steely. "We've come too far, lost too much. If they think we've lost our way, then they don't understand what's at stake here." The room was silent for a moment, the tension thick. The threat of internal division was as dangerous as any enemy fleet. If the Vanguard couldn't maintain unity, if they allowed doubt and division to take root, the war could be lost not by the Gyark, but by their own hand. "Get me the leaders of the resistance groups," Cross ordered. "We'll meet with them. If they want peace, they'll have to face the reality of what peace with the Gyark truly means." The response came quickly. Within hours, representatives from several key colonies arrived at the station, their faces tense with uncertainty. They were allies, once eager to stand with humanity, but now torn between the hope of peace and the fire of retribution. "We didn't ask for this," one of the representatives from a colony called Veridum said. "We didn't ask for war. Your vengeance has cost us lives, and now the Gyark are retaliating." Cross took a deep breath, holding her ground. "I understand your pain, but we cannot allow the Gyark to get away with what they've done. We fight for more than revenge. We fight for our future, for every life they've taken, every world they've burned." "You're blinded by your anger," another voice spoke, a representative from a mining colony in the Draco system. "And it's costing us everything. We need diplomacy, not endless destruction." Cross knew the road ahead would not be easy. The alliance she had built was fracturing before her eyes, the unity they had forged in the face of overwhelming odds beginning to crumble. The war was taking a toll on more than just their resources. It was threatening to break their resolve. But Leah Cross was not about to give in to doubt. She had led them this far, and she would lead them through the storm, even if it meant making enemies of former allies. "We don't need to agree on everything," she said, her voice unwavering. "But if you want to win this war, if you want to survive, you'll have to fight. And I won't stop fighting until every last one of us is free." The room fell silent, the weight of her words hanging in the air. Cross didn't know if they would follow her or turn away, but she knew one thing for certain. The war was far from over, and the greatest battle they would face was not against the Gyark, but against the seeds of doubt being sown within their ranks. The uneasy peace at the station lasted only a few days. The fractured alliance continued to fester, with some colonies seeking a ceasefire with the Gyark, while others stood firm beside the vanguard, unwilling to relinquish their cause. Cross could feel the tension grow with each passing hour. Every conversation, every meeting, seemed to deepen the rift. She spent more time in the command center than ever before, trying to stay ahead of the political storm that was threatening to tear them apart. She needed to focus on the bigger picture, the war. But the internal strife was a constant distraction. The fight for Earth's survival had taken on an entirely new dimension. But as she walked through the corridors of the station one night, trying to clear her mind, she felt the familiar hum of the fleet's engines vibrate beneath her boots. It was a sound that had become as constant as her heartbeat in the last few months. The vanguard ships, battered and scarred from the last battle, were still standing strong, ready for the next push. "General Cross, we've received intelligence." Colonel Hale's voice interrupted her thoughts. "It's urgent." Cross turned to face him, her brow furrowed. "What is it?" "The Gyark have mobilized. They've gathered a fleet, bigger than anything we've faced before. They're making a move on one of our key colonies in the Solana sector." Cross's stomach twisted. Solana was a strategic world, rich in resources and heavily populated. It was a hub for the remaining human colonies, a critical point that needed to be defended at all costs. If the Gyark took Solana, it could shift the balance of power in their favor, and humanity would be on the back foot. "They're striking now?" Cross asked, her voice tight with urgency. "Yes, General. They've already started their approach." The decision was clear. The vanguard could not afford to lose Solana. Not now. Not when the enemy was poised to strike at the heart of their fragile defense. There was no time for hesitation or diplomacy. The stakes were too high. "Prepare the fleet for immediate deployment," Cross ordered, her voice cold and resolute. "We'll stop them at Solana. No one touches that world." The buzz of activity in the command center picked up, officers rushing to their stations, issuing orders, and coordinating the fleet's movements. The atmosphere in the station shifted, the tension from the political struggles temporarily replaced by the familiar intensity of preparation for battle. Leah Cross stood at the center, her mind sharp, her focus unwavering. As the vanguard ships surged into formation, Cross reviewed the latest intelligence. The Gyark fleet had gathered quickly, and their numbers were overwhelming. They had adapted to the vanguard's previous tactics, learning from every encounter. Cross knew they couldn't take them head-on. They would need to use the element of surprise, hit them where they were weakest. "Deploy the decoys," Cross said, her gaze fixed on the holographic display. "We'll pull them into the asteroid field just beyond Solana's outer orbit. We can create a diversion." "We'll be outnumbered, General," Hale pointed out, his voice edged with concern. "The Gyark may not take the bait." "I know," Cross said, "but they don't know what we've learned." With the plan in motion, the Vanguard's fleet moved silently through the darkness of space, using the cover of nearby asteroids and debris to mask their approach. The decoy ships, armed with energy emitters designed to mimic the power signatures of larger warships, were deployed ahead of the main fleet. The goal was simple: lure the Gyark into a trap. As they neared Solana, the Gyark fleet appeared, massive and imposing against the backdrop of the star. Cross held her breath as the first wave of enemy ships approached the decoys. They'd taken the bait, just as she had hoped. The Vanguard's ships were in position. "Now," Cross ordered, and the fleet sprang into action. The decoys blinked out of existence as the Vanguard launched a series of devastating strikes against the now disoriented Gyark fleet. The Vanguard ships emerged from the asteroid field, blasting through the enemy's lines with pinpoint accuracy. Despite the odds, humanity's forces fought with a determination that was unmatched, their lasers tearing through the hulls of the Gyark ships. The battle was intense, the air crackling with the energy of battle. Cross watched as the Vanguard ships, though still outnumbered, fought with a ferocity that left no room for doubt. Humanity's wrath burned brighter than ever before, a searing beacon in the darkness of space. But the Zhyrk were not so easily defeated. They adapted quickly, their counterattacks brutal and coordinated. The Vanguard's decoys had thrown them off temporarily, but the Zhyrk were a force to be reckoned with. A massive Zhyrk dreadnought emerged from the heart of the battle, its weapons blazing. "We need to take it down," Cross barked, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Focus all fire on that dreadnought." The Vanguard's remaining fighters veered toward the massive ship, their weapons lighting up the void of space. The battle was far from won, and the cost was mounting with every passing minute. Cross's heart pounded as she watched the confrontation unfold. She knew that victory at Solana would mean the survival of their alliance, but defeat would mean the unraveling of everything they had fought for. As the battle raged, Cross's mind stayed sharp, her will unwavering. The Zhyrk would not break humanity's spirit. Not now. Not ever. The battle at Solana was a maelstrom of chaos, with the Vanguard ships clashing against the Zhyrk fleet in an unrelenting storm of energy blasts, laser fire, and explosions. The void was alive with the violence of war, but Leah Cross kept her focus locked onto the critical target, the Zhyrk dreadnought that was wreaking havoc on their forces. "Focus fire on its weak points," Cross commanded through the comms, her voice like iron, unshaken by the din of battle. "Target the engines and weapon systems. We take that down. We break their momentum." Her orders were immediately followed as the Vanguard ships, battered but relentless, swarmed the massive dreadnought. For every strike that hit its hulking frame, the Zhyrk retaliated with a barrage of energy that sent shockwaves through space. The Vanguard was taking losses, but the pain of losing comrades only fueled their fury. Each explosion, each burst of light that marked a fallen ship, only steeled their resolve to push forward. "We're losing the outer defenses." Colonel Hale's voice came through, tinged with urgency. "If we don't disable that dreadnought soon, we'll be overwhelmed." Leah gritted her teeth. The situation was growing dire, and the dreadnought was proving to be a far more formidable opponent than they had anticipated. Its shields absorbed every hit the Vanguard threw at it, and the sheer firepower it unleashed was enough to cripple the most advanced human ships. "Prepare the last wave," Cross ordered. "We'll take it down, or we'll die trying." The Vanguard's fleet maneuvered into a formation, each ship lining up for the final push. The coordinated assault would rely on precision and timing. They couldn't afford to miss. Cross knew that they were running on fumes, resources were dwindling, and the toll on her forces was immeasurable. But she couldn't allow that to stop her. "Not now." "Commence the assault," she said, her voice steadied despite the weight of the moment. The Vanguard's fighters and heavy cruisers surged forward, unleashing everything they had. The dreadnought's shields flickered under the intense barrage, and for a moment, Cross thought they might actually break through. But then, as if anticipating the attack, the Zhyrk flagship released a series of devastating countermeasures, a cascade of deadly mines and explosive projectiles that detonated within seconds of contact. Explosions rippled through space as several Vanguard ships were ripped apart, their fragmented remains scattering in every direction. A heavy cruiser that had been close to the dreadnought was obliterated in an instant, its crew lost in the blink of an eye. "Damn it," Cross cursed, her fists clenched in frustration. But she couldn't afford to let herself fall into despair. "We can't pull back now. Push harder." With a deep breath, she activated the command override for the fleet's remaining bombers. A special ordnance had been developed for moments like this, designed to bypass the Zhyrk's formidable defenses. These weapons would hit harder, faster, and more precisely than anything they had used so far. The bombers swarmed in, their engines roaring as they cut through the battlefield with the grace and precision of predators. Leah's heart raced as the last of the fighters pulled away, allowing the bombers to close in on their target. Cross knew the next few minutes would determine the outcome of this battle. Her fingers hovered over the trigger as the bombers neared the dreadnought's exposed core. She was aware of the lives hanging in the balance, of her people's sacrifices, the losses they had already endured. There would be no second chances. The bombs dropped. Time seemed to slow as the powerful explosives locked onto the dreadnought's central energy matrix. The moment they hit, the ship's shields faltered, and then, with a deafening roar, the dreadnought's core exploded in a wave of brilliant light. The shockwave shook the surrounding ships, but Lee held her breath, waiting. And then, silence. The dreadnought was gone, reduced to debris in the wake of the blast. The Gyark fleet, deprived of their flagship, hesitated. For a fleeting moment, the unrelenting wave of enemy fire paused, as though the Gyark were trying to process the sudden, catastrophic loss. "We've got them." Hale's voice came through, triumphant. "Their lines are breaking. Now's our chance." Cross wasted no time. "Press the advantage. Push forward and finish this. Take down their command ships." The remaining vanguard ships surged into the fray, the Gyark fleet in disarray. Without their flagship, the once formidable fleet was faltering. The tides of battle had shifted, and the vanguard capitalized on the opportunity, moving swiftly to finish what they had started. But as the victory seemed within reach, Cross couldn't help but feel the hollow echo of the cost. They had won at Solana, but at what price? The loss of so many ships and lives weighed heavily on her heart. The battle might be over, but the war was far from finished. "We did it," Hale said, sounding worn but relieved. "We turned the tide." Cross stared at the stars beyond, her mind consumed with the realization that the fight was far from over. This victory was hard-earned, but there were still many battles to be fought. And no matter the outcome, humanity's wrath would continue to burn bright. "We've only just begun," Leah Cross muttered under her breath, her resolve hardening once again. The Gyark would learn the cost of underestimating humanity. The victory at Solana was hard-fought, but it was just the beginning. The Gyark had been dealt a significant blow, but they were not a race known for surrendering easily. Leah Cross knew that their retreat from the Solana sector would not mark the end of the war. It would only be a temporary reprieve, one that humanity could not afford to squander. The vanguard fleet limped back to the station, battered but still alive. The few remaining ships in their fleet docked with exhaustion, their hulls scorched and scarred. Cross stood on the observation deck of the station, looking out at the debris field that had once been a mighty battlefield, a testament to the sacrifices made by her crew. The wreckage of Gyark ships floated amidst the stars, reminders of the price they had paid. It was a fleeting victory, but a victory nonetheless. "General Cross," Colonel Hale's voice interrupted her thoughts as he stepped onto the deck, his face grim. "We've received word from the Council. They're calling for a ceasefire with the Gyark." Cross turned to him sharply. "A ceasefire? After all this? We can't stop now. Not when they're at their weakest." "I know," Hale said, his voice heavy with concern. "But there's political pressure. The Council believes that we've done enough to prove humanity's strength. They're hoping for a peace negotiation." Cross ran a hand through her hair in frustration. Peace. She had heard it too many times already. The idea of negotiating with the Gyark felt like an insult to the lives they had lost at Solana. But she knew better than to dismiss the politics of it all. The Council had power, and the weight of their decisions could not be ignored. "I'll deal with them," Cross said, her voice steely. "Get me a direct line to the Council." As she made her way to the communications center, her mind raced. The Gyark were not just another enemy to be reasoned with. They were a relentless, calculating force, driven by their own twisted vision of dominance. No, peace was not an option, not yet. Not until humanity had ensured their place in the galaxy. The transmission from the Council was soon established, and Cross stared into the cold, detached faces of the representatives, their eyes filled with caution and hope. Their messages were clear. They wanted to negotiate, to end the bloodshed, and to rebuild the shattered alliances. Cross could almost hear the naivety in their words, the belief that appeasement would bring the end of the war. "General Cross," the lead representative said, his voice soothing yet authoritative, "we recognize the valiant efforts of the vanguard. But now is the time for diplomacy. A ceasefire would show our strength, our unity as a species. I'm afraid I don't agree. Cross cut in, her voice sharp. A ceasefire now will only serve to embolden the Zhurk. They'll see it as weakness, and they'll strike again when they're ready. There was a long silence as the council members exchanged uneasy glances. General, you're being emotional. We have to think of the bigger picture, one of the other representatives insisted. The bigger picture, Cross replied, a bitter edge to her tone. The bigger picture is that we've been fighting for survival, and every day we allow the Zhurk to rebuild their strength is a day closer to losing everything. They won't negotiate. They'll just bide their time, waiting for their next chance to destroy us. The tension in the room grew thick, and for a moment, Leah wondered if the council was truly hearing her, or if they were too entrenched in their idealistic views to understand the brutal reality of war. But she couldn't afford to back down now. Not after everything they had fought for. General, you've proven your point, but a protracted war will destroy us all, the lead representative said, his voice heavy with the weight of his position. What do you propose we do? Cross's mind flashed to the fleet, to the soldiers, the families, the lives that had been shattered by the war. Humanity had been forced into a corner, and now it was time to show the galaxy what it meant to mess with Earth. The Zhurk would not stop unless they were utterly broken. We finish this, Cross said, her voice low but resolute. We push them back to their homeworld. We take the fight to their doorstep. Only then will they understand the price of their ambition. There was silence on the other end of the transmission. The council representatives exchanged words, their murmurs too faint for Cross to hear. Finally, the lead representative spoke again, his tone uncertain but firm. Very well, General. You have our support, but know this, if this escalates further, it will be on your shoulders. Understood, Cross said, turning off the transmission and staring out at the stars once more. The path ahead was clear, but it was fraught with peril. The Zhurk had made their move, and now humanity would make its own. There would be no more compromises, no more negotiations. The war would end when humanity's wrath was finally, unmistakably, felt. Leah Cross took a deep breath. The reckoning was coming, and she would lead the charge. We will burn brighter than they ever thought possible. The decision was made. The ceasefire talks were abandoned, and humanity would no longer stand idly by while the Zhurk plotted their next move. Leah Cross, hardened by the brutal reality of war, prepared for the ultimate campaign, one that would end the conflict once and for all. The plan was simple in concept, but its execution would require every ounce of strength humanity had left. Cross's orders were clear. The vanguard would assemble one last, final strike. The Zhurk, scattered and reeling from the loss of their dreadnought, would be forced into a corner. It was time to push them back to their homeworld and force them to face humanity's wrath. The entire human fleet, what remained of it, was ready, their spirit and resolve stronger than ever. With the fleet mobilized, Cross stood at the command center of the flagship Perseverance, overseeing the final preparations. Her eyes swept over the holographic map of the galaxy, pinpointing the path to the Zhurk homeworld. The distance was vast, but the human fleet had proven their resilience. They would reach the heart of the Zhurk Empire, and they would make them regret ever underestimating humanity. We've fought hard to get here, Cross said to her officers, her voice resonating with quiet determination. This is it, the last push. We take the fight to their doorstep, and we finish what we started. Her words were met with a chorus of agreement. The officers knew what was at stake. They had already lost too much to let the Zhurk win. They would burn brighter than their enemies ever expected. The journey to the Zhurk homeworld was perilous, with the vanguard pushing deeper into enemy territory. The enemy was in disarray, yes, but that didn't mean they were unprepared. As the human fleet made its way toward the heart of the Zhurk Empire, they encountered resistance, harrying attacks from smaller fleets, hidden ambushes designed to slow them down. But Leah Cross was relentless. She understood the cost of hesitation, and her tactics were swift and decisive. Each ambush was met with overwhelming counterattacks. The Gyark had underestimated humanity's tenacity and ability to adapt. Now, they were paying the price. For weeks, the vanguard tore through the Gyark's defenses, cutting a path toward their final destination. As they neared the Gyark homeworld, the full might of the enemy's military force began to coalesce. The final battle would be a monumental clash, a war of attrition where every ship, every fighter, every soldier would give everything they had. On the eve of the final assault, Cross stood once again on the observation deck of the Perseverance, looking out at the stars. The weight of the war, the loss, and the pain of those who had fallen pressed heavily upon her. Yet despite it all, there was an unmistakable fire burning within her, the fire of determination, of purpose. "They think they can break us," Cross muttered to herself, her voice almost a whisper, "but they will learn the cost of underestimating humanity." As the final battle began, the vanguard fleet entered the orbit of the Gyark homeworld. The skies darkened as the two forces prepared for a showdown that would echo throughout the galaxy for generations. The Gyark launched their full fleet in a desperate attempt to hold their ground, but Leah Cross and her crew were ready. The Perseverance led the charge, breaking through the first line of defense, with fighters, bombers, and capital ships trailing behind. The battle raged fiercely as explosions lit up the darkened sky, with ships on both sides caught in a deadly dance of fire and fury. The vanguard pressed forward with relentless resolve, refusing to let up, despite the mounting losses. "Now," Cross barked, her voice ringing through the command center, "take down their command ship. If we destroy their leadership, their empire will crumble." With precision, the vanguard focused their fire on the Gyark flagship, a massive ship that had once been the symbol of their dominance. The ship's shields held for a time, but it was clear that the enemy was weakening. One by one, the Gyark ships fell, their forces crumbling under the overwhelming onslaught. The final blow came when the vanguard bombers launched a coordinated strike, their missiles piercing through the heart of the enemy command ship. The explosion was deafening, a shockwave that rippled through space. The Gyark flagship, once a symbol of their power, was reduced to nothing but debris. The remaining Gyark fleet faltered, unable to continue their assault. "We've done it." Hale's voice echoed through the comms, his tone filled with relief. "The Gyark are broken." But Leah Cross knew better than to celebrate prematurely. As the Gyark forces fled, she focused her attention on the aftermath. The battle was over, but the war was won only in the short term. The real victory would come in the days ahead, when humanity would rebuild, stronger than ever. The stars above glittered like a sea of possibility, and Leah Cross allowed herself a rare moment of peace. Humanity had fought with all its strength, and now the galaxy would never forget the price of crossing Earth. "We will not be forgotten," she whispered. And as the vanguard regrouped, ready for the future, Leah Cross knew that the crimson fury of humanity's wrath would continue to burn brightly, lighting the path for generations to come.